All right, let's talk shooting. Well, really, we're going to talk strategy first. So, these types of targets, in many cases, we're seeing you're shooting these pretty carefully. Like the gun's kind of parked on target for a minute before it's really moving on. And watching the third person, I can tell your head is doing a good job of trying hard to find that spot on the next target by using your neck to get your eyes out in front of the gun. But we're kind of losing some time in a lot of cases. Like the gun is parked basically on target for a second before it leaves the spot while your eyes are going ahead. So that is a place where you can save some time, like trying to attach basically your gun to your eyes at the same time, so that your vision is still beating the gun always, but that you're not wasting time like letting the gun camp out on each target, because that obviously is going to add up to like something like 0.05 to a tenth on every one of these transition exits, and that adds up a lot by the end of the match. So that's something to think about. We're also seeing in a lot of the cases where these types of targets are present, where there's a bunch of them in this match, the Charlie and Delta count is going pretty high, which tells me most likely you're not really sure of where to aim or how to engage these. And I would be looking at this way. Like, understand what size group you can produce with inputs that make sense for you. So you can, point being, right, you can probably produce like a fist-sized group on this target, and shoot the gun stuff. The shots basically never stray outside that group. Based on the difficulty of the stage, the factor of the stage, it doesn't really make sense. Like, you want to shoot something more like basically like a grapefruit, like that, and then just basically sight all that up. So just like you see there, the group pattern is never going to touch the black. Now, as this target gets farther and farther away, right, maybe it appears to you like this, and you're trying to produce kind of the same size group. That might become harder and harder to do, right? So that's when you're going to start to accept more and more pour points, essentially, so you're able to avoid keeping them on the black, or basically avoid slowing down to a snail's pace to try to punch out spots on the target. So we can talk about the actual factor estimation a little bit if you want. If you have questions about that, I think we might have talked about that last time to know if that's worth it. But as long as you understand what size group you can produce with inputs that you want to do, either reactive shooting or predictive shooting or something in between, then all you have to do is look to the spot that's exactly in the middle of that size group you wish to produce, right? And then it should be possible to just like look exactly there and know the shots are going to land in that group. I know this all sounds very easy in theory, but it looks like it needs to be applied a little bit more in training to me to make this stuff comes together. Anytime I see like tentativeness or huge Charlie counts on a specific target type, you really just got to get out there and experiment more on these types of targets and figure out what you can make happen. But I would be looking at it through this lens. How can I bolster my ability to engage these quickly by using basically known inputs or known strategies? Let me know if you have questions about that. I hope that was clear enough. Continuing onward here, this stage is, kind of breeze through this part, honestly. You get to the part with this swinger. Actually, no, we'll back up just a beat. Right, so you get to the part with these targets right here. Like, you have a pile of these types of partials in the match as well. I think your strategy here is pretty good, where you're not really trying that hard to get the points if this target is more than basically 5 yards away, which it looks like this is about that. Something like 5 yards, but on the move. You have very little chance of getting good hits on this without risking pushing them into the black or spending forever doing it. And when you have these really narrow alpha zones that are presented kind of sideways like this, you can aim your ass off all day at them and still not get the hits. So in this case, right, you're pretty much just blitz through it and like shoot keep them all brown. And I think that's a good strategy. Like, I'll be doing that pretty much as quickly as possible if the target is outside of more than, say, 7 yards. And that's exactly what I thought. Much faster, all in my head the first time I watched this through, but then you came back and put another one on that. So again, think about what hits can you actually produce with inputs that make sense. Like, if it just doesn't pay to sit there and fight for the A's because there's a chance you still might not get them, then don't bother fighting for them. And a lot of these stages look like they're pretty high factor stages, and I want to see you doing this type of thing, where not the extra shot part, but the shooting these types of targets aggressively, because it doesn't really make that much sense to sit there and fight for the points. Continuing on, this swinger here, in many cases we're seeing the stages that have moving targets. This Delta and Charlie count is also going really high, and I'm imagining it's partly just a lack of training on this type of stuff. It looks to me like this shot is probably pretty good, and this one probably is a touch late because it starts to swing away before you shoot. The strategy again here that you're taking, I think, is sound. What I do generally is I'm going to look at an actual object in the back berm, like here and here, and I'm going to shoot when the target comes to me basically the target crosses my vision and I have that good perception that I'm in the middle of the target, and then I'm just going to transition to the second engagement point and shoot it there. But by trying to trap it in this way, to try to make it so it's two isolated timed shots rather than a chase, I think it makes it much easier. So I want to see, when you come here to engage this, I want to see very little movement of the gun from the time that it's closed to the time that it's open. Like, I don't want to see a whole bunch of movement here where you're clearly trying to track the target up and around. So I think your strategy is good, but I would not worry about trying to track it and glue your gun to the target on these. I think that actually makes things much more difficult. We'll talk about one more strategic element with this stage, because I kind of glossed over this massive kerfuffle that happens with this sequence down here. The obvious limitation of shooting on the move, working this direction, right, is that you then can't see exactly where you need to step right there. So from this moment going forward, you're relying on your choreography and kind of your step count to get you into the right position. So whether it's left, right, left, whatever, and then you land in the right spot, then you're all set up so your hips are square and you can kind of do what you need to do. That all works great in the walkthrough, and if you have infinite time to sit there and dope it out and do it time after time, then that can work for some people. I generally prefer to just look where I want to step and then step there. So I would either prioritize engaging this target from right here and kind of roll your weight but not necessarily your feet, and then do a movement to this spot so that you can step on the pad, shoot this target behind the barrel and finish on the swinger, or potentially even just blitz all the way to here. So you shoot this stuff in this quadrant off to the left, look exactly where you want your foot to go there, step in deep with your right foot, and then just sweep this whole array left to right. Either way would give you the opportunity to look at that stomp pedal and make sure that you step on the right spot. Obviously, hindsight's 20/20, and sometimes you just don't expect that these things aren't going to work, but I pretty much always will make it a point to step exclusively on the correct half of these, the one that is going to trigger the thing, because I have been boned by those before in this exact fashion. And I mean, this hemmed you up for at least 2 seconds just by not stepping on the thing, quote unquote, correctly. So something to think about in terms of how you're using your vision to guide your way through the stage, and just kind of using small insurance policies that don't really cost anything but can make sure you're in control of the outcome. All right, so having talked strategy, let's talk about shooting a little bit here. I want you to pay close attention to sort of the behavior of the gun in this two arrays, and just kind of see the consistency of it, and then I'll show it again in the third person. Okay, so moving, buffeting. It's that same array in the third person, and it's even more telling, really. Oh, this is the array, actually. So hopefully the problem here is somewhat clear. We see array A, right? You're kind of shooting your way through the stuff after reload. Not crazy difficult shots, but definitely what we'd call conditional go shots. You have to hit the steel before you're allowed to proceed. You can see this pretty nicely on this mesh background with a wall. Just kind of watching, not even the gun, but your hand. You can see the gun lifts approximately the same amount, but you can see the return is immediate. And you can see that, there's a little bit of wobble, which we'll talk about in a minute. But the actual amount the gun lifts is a little bit less, and the return is absolutely instant. And we get this second array where these shots are a lot tougher, and we're going to see this very pronounced lift, and the gun kind of hangs there for a second. Right? No, it's not going to be able to see it on this one, but it does the exact same thing on the final target here. And you can even see there's a little bit of a regrip right here as you go to move this position. This obviously is not at all constructive. We want to see the return be the same all the time. So I would strongly recommend you do some extreme difficulty paper shooting in the cons, with like a 5-yard target mixed in, and force yourself to make sure that actual return is the same all the time. Speaking to the actual mechanics, I think it would help a lot to just eliminate how much the gun lifts and therefore how much you have to return it. by getting your elbows a little bit straighter. If we look at this right here, it looks like, well, it looks like you got really short arms. So your shoulder's here and your wrist is here. I know you don't. It's just kind of that your elbow is pointed towards the camera, so to speak. So that if you look at this top down, your elbows are way out like this. And this is the gun here. So your elbows are pointed like really extreme outward. Again, looking at this from the top down right here. If you get those straighter out so that we go from like this, to something more like this, where your arms are kind of straight and your elbows go kind of maybe out but more slightly downward, then you're probably going to find that the actual hopping that happens at the wrist here is going to be a lot more understated. But you can see when you watch this from the side, the entire base of your wrist is moving upward, and that flexion is happening at the elbow. So that movement kind of goes through your entire arm, like a wave, because your elbow is able to flex. It probably would help you reduce shoulder tension too if you stand a little bit more up straight. It can help to kind of counteract the pushback of recoil. If you just dig your toes like into the bottom of your shoes, that usually is enough to just front bias your weight, just enough that the gun's not going to blow you back doing like a bill drill or something like that. But the farther forward you lean, the more like basically the angle between your upper body and your arms, the more acute this angle gets as this wrist goes upward, because your upper body is canted essentially more forward. Hopefully I'm not going too crazy here. That's going to make your shoulders a lot more tight, because if you bring your arms upward closer to your face, basically all that tissue in the top of your shoulders has to sort of seize up to actually get the gun close to your face like that. So, in layman's terms, push the gun farther away from your face, right, so that your elbows are pretty much completely straight, not hyperextended and locked out, but just barely unlocked, and then get your shoulders basically back to neutral while standing completely straight up normal. Like, it should be like if you're standing this normally, comfortably, the way that you would having a conversation with someone with your arms at your sides, and basically the front of your delts and your pecs are going to bring the gun up in front of your face with your arms completely straight out so that they both mate on the gun. Any deviation from that, the more bend and effort we put in, the harder it's going to be to return all this stuff consistently. Specifically speaking to the elbow lockout, it's going to reduce like this wave motion you're seeing in your arm right here a lot as you're firing the gun, and that's going to reduce how much the gun can jump and therefore how much you have to return it. These lightweight poly guns are going to show you a lot. I mean, when we're seeing inconsistency from target to target, you can fix that by working on, making sure you're not letting the gun not return, like as a matter of habit, just like you have to focus on your grip pressure as a matter of habit. But by changing the structure, you can limit how much the gun is going to move in the first place. So that's something to think about. Again, if you have questions about this, please just ask. Don't be a stranger, because I know this is kind of complex to explain over just the video. Let's continue to talk about grip and technique just a little bit. I'm personally kind of the philosophy that the gun, the dot motion itself doesn't really matter. Like, it doesn't matter to me that much if it goes like 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock or whatever, as long as it returns perfectly consistently. The limitation of having it go more towards 1, 2, 3 o'clock, as it deviates away from 12, is that consistency becomes harder and harder to achieve. And we see, watching kind of as we go in slow motion, your gun definitely kicks out to the right a little bit in recoil, and pretty consistently will land with, obviously the dots in the window because you can see what's happening, but you can see the gun is peeled way off to the right here. With the M&Ps, they have this pretty bulbous, like, kind of like front to back sort of grip situation going on. I'm imagining the reason that you're getting so much right side deviation like this is because you're putting a lot of effort. Again, we're looking at this diagram right here as if this is a cutaway diagram of the M&P grip itself. But I'm imagining you're putting a lot of emphasis into driving this palm into the corner of the gun like this, and sort of like that torquing that you're getting on the left side of the gun with the heel of your palm is what sort of gives you your sense of control over whether or not you're applying pressure on the gun. And what I would do instead is try to pinch with basically, without driving your palm in, like try to pinch with your front two, your distal two sets of knuckles to get us that you're pinching back around the gun this way and this way, if that makes sense, in addition to that palm drive. And that's going to make it so you have a more comprehensive 360 degree pressure on the gun. And that's probably going to reduce that tendency for the gun to kick out to the right like this quite a bit, if I had to guess. Again, if you have questions about that, just let me know. I can send you a clarification video just face to cam and sort of explain what I mean a little better. Let me know. Here we see a repeat of some of the stuff we've talked about already. I'll call it out as I see it. Okay, coming into right here, you see you have to basically to get on a tiptoe to get at this first target. What I'd like to see it instead basically is looking at the spot you want to land on the ground right here, especially if you can anchor it around where we want 1 foot to land. In this case, probably be better to do your, think about exactly where you want your left foot to land and look exactly there. So that in this position, you're taking your last glance at that spot, so you can be positive you're going to land right there. Coming into this array, this part's actually new, but I think you're trying to essentially float across the back line, so to speak, and just shoot whatever presents next so that you're making the shortest transitions possible. And in doing that, you're having walls in your way a lot, and you're doing a lot of wide transitions compared to if you just deal with each compartment kind of on its own. So you deal with the left compartment you just did, this window, and then this opening. And it's probably going to make it so you're sweeping kind of all in the same direction the whole time, and maybe even doing more stuff while you're moving. But it's going to enable you to see the target you want to transition to much sooner. And it should enable you to actually shoot faster with less, with faster transitions if you are able to make the shots while you're still moving around a bit. Because we see in every one of these transitions, right, on every entry, there's like at least a tenth of confirmation getting onto there, and then even a pickup shot on that one steel still. Like, that's quite slow. And I know some stages are just set up so it's like this no matter what. Like, I actually like the way you handled this section better strategically. Like, you just deal with this whole window and then you step out to get to the last target because it's a shorter transition this way. I didn't hate this part. The only thing I really didn't like about this is, like we talked about before, look at the difference in the actual gun behavior on this target compared to this one. Like, a very pronounced lift, pause, and fall on the gun on this final target. For no real apparent reason, which is always concerning, even if it doesn't cost you anything in the moment. This stage is a pretty good one to start to talk about factor math on in terms of like the minor strategic decisions you can get made. So what you need to know first, obviously, is you have to be able to estimate. You know your points. If you just have the number of rounds, you multiply that by 5. In this case, the full-size stage, it's 32 rounds, 160 points. You need to be able to estimate your time, roughly. And if you just have someone else that you kind of meter off of, or if you have previous scores and people that should be approximately as fast as you, maybe like open shooters that are down a class from you, or other hot shooters that are kind of in your approximate skill level, that can give you a pretty good estimate. It only needs to be within 2 or 3 whole seconds. Let's say in this case you estimate your time to be either 20 or 25, right? So if we say 160 points divided by 20, that would be an 8. We say 160 divided by 25, that's going to be 6.4. So if we just average that out to a 7, we can estimate a 7. In the case of and the cheat code that I use for knowing strategically what you should do, and this mostly just reaffirms a lot of the strategies and systems I have, is at a 5 factor, every Charlie is going to cost you 0.4. You have your practice score set up so that it's telling you this information. It's obvious you're doing your best to learn it in real time. At a 10 factor, it's going to be half that. It's going to be 0.2. So it's going to be basically about 0.3 at a 7 factor for every Charlie that you drop. So what you should be asking yourself is, where is it going to take longer than 0.3 to aim and get those points? Or if I'm near 0.3 with the splits that I'm shooting, is there still a chance that I might not get the hits that I want? And this is going to, with that information, you can choose to aim safer on tougher targets as they permit. Sometimes, like if my hit zone that I need to hit is here, and sort of it's oh crap, this is a bad diagram. Oh boy, really bad diagram. Basically, my hit zone is here, and then I'm just going to start over. My alpha zone is here, and then I have penalty target kind of across it like this, so all this part is white. There's basically, the farther you aim safe away from that no-shoot, obviously the more safety you're going to buy. But sometimes you have like a tuxedo or something where you can't aim safer on it. You just have to get the hits in the middle of the A zone and basically produce that known group size with the inputs you have to know that the shots are never going to touch the black. So, let's watch how this goes here. On the easy targets, we know with that assumption, right, if we're taking difficult targets and aiming safe on them, you have to lock down perfect points on the stuff that it's easy to get points on. Oh dear, what happened? Oh, shit. This is a long monologue to then backpedal. Oh, dear. So, starting back approximately here. Let's go. Okay, so far we have all targets that should be 100% A's. The only place I think is questionable is right here, right? Where you're doing this blitzing through this position, firing an extra shot. Obviously you saw something you didn't like. These guys, you have to aim safe enough to keep them off the black, and if you just do that, like you aim at the actual line itself in the A zone, you should be able to get the points on those with moderately careful shooting. And this part is strategically risky because of the fact, this is pushing, no doubt, where you're shooting these on the move. I would probably shoot these a touch more carefully, but still take them moving if I were you, and that should get you, at worst, one Charlie on these types of targets. This is all good. And this would be one where I would definitely choose to basically play it safe on. I'm not going to plant here flat-footed and fight to get the points on a target like that. I'm just going to basically lob them in a fist-sized group, basically in the neckline, and just accept that there's a chance I might double Charlie this target. And so I think largely I feel like you understand this strategically. We just see 8 Charlies where I'd like to see like 4, if that makes sense. I know sometimes they just happen unexpected, like shooting pretty aggressively across this backer right here, where this is a situation where it makes sense to play it. Like these are easy targets open targets at 15 yards. With the dot, I would consider that a place to pick up points very easily. So you can shoot safe, clean, easy, and slow, and still basically do the right thing, because dropping Charlies on those just doesn't really benefit your score compared to on something where you can actually gain time on it. Again, we see you trying to save steps here by hanging back off this position, but then you have to take two movements to get there. So you're not really saving motion at all, right? Like you would have been better off picking a position probably, as we see it, like right about here on the ground, so that you can see all this whole quadrant of the stage, and then be able to get to the next window, get deeper into the next window, and see everything you need to see with just one step. This is turning into a strategy habit that I would probably lean away from if I were you. I think you're going to be better off not thinking about it like you're minimizing steps, just like think about it like, how can I make the view of the targets the easiest and simplest to get to in every case, as opposed to just trying to save some arbitrary number of steps or something like that.